What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Gamecite Chronicles, the console gaming podcast where we sit down each and every week to talk about our favorite hobby, video games. I'm your host, Bonfire, and this is episode number 8. 8 episodes in, feeling good and ready to talk about video games because it's been an interesting week, albeit maybe more mild compared to previous weeks. Now, I appreciate those of you that tuned into last week's episode. I hope you thought it was a good conversation, or at least thought-provoking. Hopefully I made some good points. And again, love to hear from you. So let me know down in the comments below. Hope you guys have had a good week or having a good week, depending on the time you're listening to this podcast. And if you're a golf fan like myself, well, I'm sure not many gamers are golf fans out there, but I certainly am. And it's Masters time. I'm recording this on Saturday, so round 3 of the Masters just got over. It's championships on Sunday tomorrow. And I'm excited. I don't know. For me, I've gotten into golf. I've always been into golf, kind of. You know, my grandfather used to take me as a kid, to the driving range, and he kind of taught me a little bit. And then I just here and there kind of throughout growing up. But here lately, I would say the last maybe 10 years, I kind of got into it more consistently. And then, here we are. Really, the last 3 years or so, I really just went head on first, and it's now become like my favorite sport to play, and I really enjoy watching it. Ironically, I never thought I'd say that in my life, but I really do enjoy it. So Masters is going on, exciting times for those of you out there. But again, this is a video games podcast, not a golf podcast. Now, for the uninitiated, remember the best way you can support the show is to leave a comment on whatever platform you're listening to and drop a like on the video. Leave us a good rating on the podcast platform you are enjoying this podcast on. It's always appreciated, and it really helps out in terms of algorithms, people want to search for the podcast, stuff like that. Additionally, you can check us out on Locals. Join the community over there, locals.com. The URL is thegamesitechronicles.locals.com. Head on over there. I'd love to see your faces over there, interact with you. It's a really cool platform. It's Patreon-esque, though I don't have tiers or anything set up, so don't worry about that. That can come down the road once we get a little bit more established. And lastly, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Gamecite Podcast. Now, before we dive into anything, I do have a correction from last week's episode. During the episode, I had talked about using my PlayStation Vita to stream my PlayStation 4 and play PS4 games, and I said I played Persona 4 that way via remote play. That is incorrect. I was actually playing Persona 5. I was playing Persona 5 via remote play on my Vita from my PS4, and that really was a good experience. Like, if you got a decent internet connection, games like that where it's like turn-based or very slow, doesn't really require it's not fast-paced, super action-oriented, is perfect for remote play. And that's the game I was actually playing, is not Persona 4. So did want to put that correction out there just in case, because I'm not afraid to. I made a mistake. You know what happens? You're blabbing about you're talking, you're blabbing. These things happen. So just wanted to put that out there. Now, for this week and this episode, I wanted to focus on what I think is the game of the year so far. And the reason behind this, and kind of why I want to dive into this topic, is because we're, a quarter into 2022, and it's been bonkers, just absolutely bananas in terms of the video game releases and the games that we've had. Like, there's been so many great games that have been released, and I can't even keep up, and I'm sure other people are having trouble keeping up because there's just so many great games to play out there. So I wanted to cover that, talk about what I think is the game of the year so far, do some predictions on that, and talk about some of the great games that have been released thus far, and also predict some rewards that some of the other games might win, because I do think just kind of a fun episode to kind of speculate and reflect on the crazy first quarter of 2022. But before we get into that, and before we get into the games I'm playing, there are a couple of news items I wanted to quickly cover. The first of which is a new Tomb Raider game was announced, being developed by Crystal Dynamics. Now, this was revealed during the Unreal Engine 5 showcase, like whatever that was. I think there's some sort of big game, not GDC, but something like GDC, some game developer type conference that was going on. And so Epic did an Unreal Engine 5 showcase. I didn't watch it, to be honest, but I did catch this announcement because it's kind of made the rounds in terms of the video game world. And from that, Crystal Dynamics came out and said, hey, we're working on a new Tomb Raider game. As well as they also showed a bunch of other upcoming games that are using the Unreal Engine 5. So things like Hellblade 2, Arc 2, Survival Evolved, or whatever, like that, the sequel to that game. And a couple others, as well as like whatever the next Gears of War game is using Unreal Engine 5. Not a surprise there because they started at Epic in the original Gears of War with Cliff Bleszinski. Excuse me, I keep burping into the microphone. But other than that, they just said that the new Tomb Raider game just started development. No real details were provided, so they had like no concept arts they were showing, no images, just nothing. It was literally just a straight up announcement. So nothing really to go off of, nothing really to ride home about or like be super pumped and hyped about. But I gotta say, it's nice to see Crystal Dynamics go back to the Tomb Raider games. I think that's more of what they're better at, because if you think about it, like they did the 3 Tomb Raider reboot games. What is it? Obviously Tomb Raider 2013, Rise of the Tomb Raider, and then Shadow of the Tomb Raider. I think that's the order that they go in. And, you know, I think those are all good games. I think the 2013 reboot is the best out of the 3, in my opinion. Like I liked that one the most. I don't know. I genuinely enjoyed that game. And I actually played it on PS3 back in the day when it came out. But to see them go from that, like traditional, you know, third person action adventure games, linear though, the latter ones started to open up a bit, not fully open world by any means, but kind of bigger open areas, maybe little side quests, especially in the last game, or the most recent one, I should say. To go from that to Avengers, to try to take on a live service model, a live service game, albeit you could argue that, again, from the single player perspective, that is more of like what they're capable of, right? That third person action adventure kind of narrative driven story game, which makes sense. But all the live service stuff, the multiplayer stuff, just did not make sense to have Crystal Dynamics do. So it's nice to see them go back to Tomb Raider. And one of the interesting things that kind of came about this is I was kind of digging around articles, and this actually came from Polygon of all places. So every now and then, Polygon is mostly just trash reporting, but every now and then they got some good gems, and I stumbled across this, and they pointed out that Jeff Ross, who is formerly of Bend Studios, a first-party PlayStation team, that's the team that made Days Gone, that PS4 exclusive, if you all remember that, he announced that he's now over at Crystal Dynamics and working as the game's director for this new Tomb Raider game. So very interesting that. And I think what's interesting about that is because it'll be interesting to see his influence on that, because Days Gone, whether you like it or not, is narratively interesting, and I think there's a lot of good there. For me, I got the game when it came out, and I played it for a little bit. Wasn't really feeling it, mostly because of the story's pacing. I think that's the game's biggest and most glaring weakness, is the game's story pacing. It's just atrocious. I did not like it, so it really put me off at first, and so I put it down for a bit. I did eventually come back to Days Gone and plowed through the rest of the game and got quite a few of the trophies too. Like I got to the point where I was like, I'm really enjoying kind of like doing the checkbox things, like going around collectibles, finding things. And while I didn't get the platinum, I got quite a few trophies, and I was pretty satisfied with my completion of that game. And by the end of it, you know, I looking back, I do think it's a good game. I think it's a little underrated, if I'm being honest. Though I understand the criticisms. I do think it's underrated. I do think it's a good game. And especially with the zombie mechanics and kind of the open world. And personally, one of the things I really liked about it is that it took place in Oregon. You know, that's where I am, Pacific Northwest here in Oregon. It's cool to see that represented in video games, and makes sense because Sony Bend is from Oregon. So I guess I'm a little biased in that degree, but nonetheless, I think that, you know, Days Gone kind of got shit on for maybe more than it needed to be. But knowing what was done in that game and maybe seeing what from maybe either a narrative perspective or maybe a gameplay perspective that could be brought over into a new Tomb Raider game, I think is exciting. So I think this little tidbit of information, Jeff Ross going over to Crystal Dynamics, is a good thing. And for me, I mentioned this, but the newest Tomb Raider game, what is it? I think Shadow of the Tomb Raider. I didn't really enjoy that much. And I don't know, the story didn't capture me. The kind of open world, and well, not fully open world, but more open, and then there's side quests and stuff like that. It just, I don't know, it didn't really feel like it was that great of a game. I feel like maybe it was a little overrated compared to the others, but nonetheless, so it's nice to see them go back. I hope they kind of go back to the roots of like the 2013 Tomb Raider and kind of get away from this kind of, I guess, like father drama and like keep it, I don't really want the side quests. I want a good, interesting story. I want more exploration. Like, let's get back to kind of classic Tomb Raider a little bit, like reel it in. That would be ideal. And we'll see what Jeff Ross brings to the table. So I don't know. I'm excited, but it's going to be, probably 3 years before we see anything or hear anything more of this game, because it sounds like it's just started development. So nothing to write home about, but nonetheless, I do want to point it out because it's nice to see Crystal Dynamics moving on from Avengers into what I think is something they're better suited at. Now, the other piece of news that I really briefly wanted to touch on is that the BAFTA Game Awards happened. And I don't really follow all the other video game awards. Like the Game Awards, I follow that, again, mostly because of the announcements. And, it's a big kind of industry party. I think it's just interesting to watch that, albeit I do have my problems with the Game Awards that maybe I'm sure we'll cover when it comes around later this year. But the other ones like the BAFTA, the DICE Awards, etc., that are more for the game development industry rather than the consumer part of the industry, I don't really follow too much. But I did see that Returnal swept these awards, and they won audio achievement, they won best music, the actress that played Celine won best performer, and they won best game, which is awesome to see. And I think Sony walked away with a total of 6 awards. I think Ratchet and Clank won a couple. So I thought that was pretty cool, and I wanted to highlight it because, as you know, and I've been talking about this for the last episode or two that I've been playing. I got back into Returnal, and I'm just reminded me of how freaking good that game is. It's fantastic. It really is. The more I've played of it, the more I think about that game. I'm like, this really is an awesome game. I think it's fun to play. It runs well. It sounds amazing. I've talked about the audio. Obviously, it's winning awards for that. It looks great. It really uses the DualSense very well. Like, probably one of the best games to use the DualSense on the PS5. Right up there with Astro's Playroom, or whatever that free PS5 game that you should not skip out when you get your PS5 if you haven't already played it. But yeah, I mean, it just reminds me that Returnal is an awesome game and you should try it. I highly recommend Returnal. Now, again, it's not going to be a game for everyone because I do think there are folks out there that just not going to jive to it, or it's going to be too hard, or you're just not going to have the patience for it. And I understand that, but I do think people should give it a go, and don't sleep on this one because it's a fantastic game and it's worth your time. And whenever the new PlayStation Plus lineup comes out, Returnal will be in there as a downloadable PS5 title for that tier. I think it's that middle and up tier. So you can try it there, for a low entry fee to give the game a go. And I highly recommend you do so. So now let's get into what games have I been playing. And as always, let me know what games you've been playing down in the comments below, because I want to check those out. And I want to start incorporating your answers into the show, just because I love hearing all the different games that folks are playing out there. So hit me up. But what have I been playing lately? Not much has changed in the last week, if I'm being honest. I know we talked about last week, I was playing Returnal. I'm still continuing that. I'm still trophy hunting on that. I'm 3 trophies away from the platinum. But I need to take a break because again, the last trophies I need are finishing the surveys in 3 of the biomes, and it's RNG based in terms of finding these last like glyphs that I need. And so you can do runs after runs, and I know they've improved the RNG with some of the updates, so people can the platinum is more realistic to obtain. But I just needed a break. I wanted to get back to Horizon, so that's what I did. I've mostly been playing Horizon Forbidden West, and I've been progressing more of the story, playing through that, doing some of the. Well, I haven't really been doing too many side missions, but trying to beef up some of my armor and my weapons. And I knocked out some of those. There's like these excavator missions you can do, and like where people need you to go into contracts. That's what they are. You do these contract missions, and they need you to go out and get parts for these teams that are building armors, and then it's like for this big armor building contest. So I completed that, got that armor set, which is pretty cool. So I'm just trying to get through that, and really I just want to kind of get through the rest of the story, and move on to something else. Horizon is a fantastic game. I'm enjoying my time with it, but there's so many other things I want to play that I kind of just want to just get this one off my plate so I can move on to something else. And one thing about this, I do want to mention that Guerrilla put out an update for this game, and the coolest part of this update is you can toggle pickup animations. So standardly, you'd pick up an item or get these crafting materials, and you bend down to pick it up, and it's this very brief animation, but it over time, because you need to get these things a lot, because it's how you craft ammunition, health potions, etc. And you can toggle that off to where you just straight up pick it up, kind of like Ghost of Tsushima, where you just pick up stuff like while you're riding the horse. And so that is an awesome update. I love it. That's a fantastic update. So you can just run around and just tap triangle to pick up all these resources as you're just kind of cruising through it. And it makes it so much easier. It's really, really, really nice. So I've been digging that. The other thing I wanted to mention in terms of games I've been playing is Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga released this past week. And I know a lot of people are hyped about it. I been wanting the game, and I told myself, I'll pick it up later in the year because I knew there were so many other games that I wanted to play. But, ladies and gentlemen, I caved in. I made the purchase. I picked up the game because it just looks so dang fun. I watched a little bit of gameplay, and it really seems like this game changes up the Lego formula. Like Lego games, for all the licensed properties they do, they're all generally the same style of games, gameplay, etc. You kind of do the same types of things. They're collectathons, etc. But this one really seems to change it up a bit. Like there's a little bit more of diversity in the gameplay. Flying your starships, cover base. There's a little bit. Seems like there's better combat, etc. And so I caved in and I got the game, and I am probably going to start playing that maybe even before I finish Horizon, just because it seems like a game that I'm just going to enjoy kind of going through the motions of doing the collectathon. And I've said this in the past that I'm a huge Star Wars fan, albeit the new trilogy did kind of stain Star Wars in my opinion. But I played Lego Star Wars the last Lego Star Wars game, which was The Force Awakens, that one. I did play through that. I enjoyed my time with it. So I'm excited to do this, play through all 9 movies, do the collectathon. And I got to give a shout out to my boy, Legend of Cotton. He highly recommended it. He's been playing through it. And he actually informed me that they got the cast, the original actors from the Clone Wars, the Clone Wars series, to do some of the voice acting for, I think, the first 3 movies. So, Obi-Wan, Anakin, etc., Padme, I believe. So that's awesome. And that is another bonus point for this game. So I'll report out on that once I dive into it, but I am very, very eager and excited to do it. And that leads us into the main topic for this week's episode. And that is, what is the game of the year so far? We're 1 quarter into 2022. Lots of amazing games have come out. So let's have some fun. Let's speculate. Let's go through the list. And so that's kind of how I want to walk through this. I want to walk through some of the major releases, mostly on the AAA side. I've pulled out 26 games that have been released in January, February, and March of this year to walk through, and we'll go through those games. I want to go through the Metacritic scores as well as the user scores, just to kind of provide context and how people are perceiving these games. And then I want to talk about some awards and what I think is the game of the year thus far, and go through some awards. Now, one thing I do want to say and caveat this is that I have not played all these games. That's like impossible. Well, it's not impossible, but I have not played all of these games. So I do want to preface that, and that this conversation is just based on pure speculation, kind of looking at the scores, the reviews, the hype, as well as kind of the internet chatter around some of these games, and really most of all, just to have some fun. It's fun to speculate. It's fun to have these types of conversations and looking at games. And then I want to wrap it up with, let's look at some other big games that could be a contender for Game of the Year that we know or are supposed to be coming in 2022. So let's dive into that list. First game on the list is Rainbow Six Extraction. This one came out on January 20th. It was a day one release on Game Pass. I actually dove into it for a very brief moment. And this has an Xbox Metacritic score of 71 and a user score of 6.0. Got to be honest, I was a little surprised on that user score being, and really the Metacritic score, those scores being as high as they are, because I really felt like this game, from a lot of people, the reception was, oh, this should just be DLC. And it's very repetitive, not a ton of content here, etc. But it seems like, people are having a decent time with it. I know in my brief time with it, it was fun, serviceable at best. I'm not super into these types of games, but, I enjoyed my brief time with it for the most part. So nonetheless, that game kind of started us off on the year. And then you have Pokemon Legends Arceus. Hopefully I'm saying that right. I don't know if I am. That came out on January 28th for the Switch, and that is a Metacritic score of 83 and a user score of 8.3. And this game, a lot of people were talking about this game and said it was the kind of the Pokemon game that really spiced up the formula. And that excites me because, coming off Pokemon Sword and Shield, that's really the last mainstay Pokemon game that I played and really got back into the franchise, because before that, it'd been a long, long time since I played a Pokemon game. And as a kid, man, I was a diehard Pokemon fan. And, coming off Pokemon Sword and Shield, I wasn't super excited for Diamond and Pearl. I was like, maybe I'll eventually pick it up if I'm having an itch for some Pokemon, but it didn't really interest me too much. And this game came out, 2 months or so after that. So I wasn't, maybe 3 months. So I wasn't super eager to get back into Pokemon. But it seems like this game changes up the formula just enough to, be interesting. So I do eventually want to try this out, because it does look pretty fun, and I kind of want to see what the hype's all about. So maybe I'll get into that later this year, or if we get a good sale on it, though these games don't typically go on sale, but nonetheless, we shall see. And then after that, we have Dying Light 2 Stay Human that came out on February 4th. This has a PS5 Metacritic score of 76 and a user score of 4.9. That shocked me a little bit. Now, as we've talked about on the show, I dove into Dying Light 2. I've probably put in roughly 30 hours or so. I do want to get back to it, finish the story. But I know this game did have some technical issues at launch that I think have mostly been patched out, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe that's where that user score is coming from, but I don't know. I don't, from what I've played, I wouldn't say it's that low, but certainly not, I wouldn't say this is a Game of the Year contender. I'll just put that out there right there. And I do think that the first Dying Light 2, at least from what I've played thus far of Dying Light 2, the first Dying Light's better from what I've played. But that's not to say Dying Light 2 is a bad game by any means. Anyways, I digress there. Next on the list is Sifu. That came out on February 8th. This has a Metacritic score of 80 and a user score of 8.1. And this game is interesting. This game is very interesting. And it's, when I first saw it at the PlayStation State of Play, when it was announced, I thought, this looks interesting. I like the art style, but I don't know if it's a game for me, because it does seem kind of like a fighting game, and I didn't understand the aging mechanics, though to be honest, I still don't fully, because I haven't played it. But it looks interesting, and it seems like a lot of people have been saying this game's pretty good, albeit very difficult. So again, this is another one I'd like to at least try at some point, but I think it's had a pretty good reception, and people seem to be enjoying it. Again, if you can get over that high difficulty curve there. After that, we have Crossfire X, which I believe is an Xbox exclusive, console exclusive, I should say. Came out February 10th. Has an Xbox Metacritic score of 39 and a user score of 3.2. And by all accounts, from what I've heard about this game, both multiplayer and single player, is just trash, not good. I've heard nothing but bad things about that game. So it seems like not much of a hit there on the Xbox side for that one. And then there's this RPG called Edge of Eternity, which kind of, from what I've seen of it, kind of looks like a single A RPG title, or, a double A style of game. But that came out also on February 10th. Has a PS5 Metacritic score of 60 and a user score of 6.8. So kind of just meh, that's what I'm kind of taking from the scores there. And this next one I put on here called Lost Ark. Now, this is a PC only game, and this is a console gaming podcast, but this game kind of took the world by storm when it launched. Like, everyone was playing it. It had, I think it set record numbers on Steam, record numbers on Twitch, etc. It just kind of took the world by storm when it launched on February 11th. And so I feel like I have to include it into this conversation just because it was a massive game. This has a PC Metacritic score of 81 and a user score of 5.4. So definitely some variation there between the users and critics. And I got to say, I would love to see if this game comes to consoles. It kind of has that Diablo style from what I've seen of it. And it looks interesting. And I've watched some reviews, watched some gameplay, and it seems like kind of a mixed, reactions from people, where I see some people that say the game is very repetitive. There's not a ton of diverse content in there, whereas other people say they've really enjoyed their time with it. There's lots to do, and so it just seems like a mixed bag depending on what you're looking for from that game. But nonetheless, it did take the world by storm. And after that, we have obviously Horizon Forbidden West, came out February 18th. Has a PS5 Metacritic score of 88 and a user score of 8.0. And, again, those are great scores. I've talked about Horizon Forbidden West a ton, so we won't belabor that point. Destiny 2, The Witch Queen expansion, came out February 22nd. That is a PS5 Metacritic score of 88 and a user score of 8.2. So again, really good. And if you compare it to Horizon, this is interesting. Same critic score, Metacritic score, but the user score, Destiny 2, The Witch Queen, has a better user score. So really interesting. And by all accounts, I think that seems to be a good expansion. I haven't heard anything really bad about it. And kind of reminds me that one topic that I'd like to dive into a future episode of the podcast is about live service games, because I have experience with a couple of them. I want to talk about that, but also I want to talk about just how intimidating these games are to me and can be, and just kind of just dabble in a little bit without and kind of some of my problems with it. And because I find the genre and most of the games in the genre fascinating, and games that I'd love to try out, but I feel like the entry barrier is so high. So anyways, we'll save that topic for another day. Then there's another game that I haven't really seen a lot of people talk about, but I wanted to put it in here because I think it looks interesting. That's called Sol Cresta. This is from Platinum Games. It's basically a shoot 'em up, like you get your airplane or spaceship or whatever, and you just classic arcade style shoot 'em up style of game. And I think it looks cool. I really want to try it out. That came out February 22nd. Surprisingly, no reviews on Metacritic or user reviews. So I don't know how well this game is sold. But nonetheless, I do want to try it. I think it looks cool. And so I wanted to put it in here. And then obviously the big one, Elden Ring, came out February 25th. Has a PS5 Metacritic score of 96, a user score of 7.9. Now, when we did our Soulsborne episode a few weeks ago, this 96 is actually, I think, a point lower than what it was when we did that episode. So that's interesting. And then the user score, I believe, is also higher. Bigger. So I don't know what's going on with that game from scoring perspective, but I thought that was interesting. I thought I'd point that out. For me, again, I've been in media blackout on this game, albeit it's taken over the world. Everyone's talking about it. It's memes everywhere. But until I finally get into that game, I'm not paying attention to any of that stuff because I want to go in as fresh as possible. After that, we have Elix 2. which came out on March 1st, has an Xbox Metacritic score of 70 and a user score of 7.1. And Elix 2 is interesting because I watched some gameplay, and I remember the first game, Elix, when that game came out. And actually, I played it at PAX in, I think, 2016, a while ago. And actually, my good buddy Rob, friend of the show, Rob, he went with me, and we both played this game. He liked it, and he actually picked up Elix when it came out. And he was telling me, telling me about the game, and he said he enjoyed it and everything, but it just never really spoke to me, so I never really delved into it. But I've watched some gameplay of the sequel, Elix 2, and I gotta say, I hate to say this, but it looks janky. It just kind of looks almost like an Xbox 360 style of game. Like, kind of reminds me of Fallout 3 a little bit in terms of jankiness. But I don't know if, it has some decent scores, in the 70s, 7.1. So, I mean, there's something there that some people are enjoying, I would say. But I don't think it's a game really for me. And then we have Shadow Warrior 3, which also came out on March 1st, and no reviews, which I thought was weird because the Shadow Warrior series seems to be, I thought, fairly popular, albeit I've never played them, but nonetheless, I thought that's interesting. Then we have Babylon's Fall. We've talked a little bit about this game. Came out March 3rd. It has a PS5 Metacritic score of 40 and a user score of 2.2, so not so good. And then Gran Turismo 7 came out March 4th. That is a PS5 Metacritic score of 87 and a user score of 1.9. That's crazy. Like, I think this game has just gotten review bombed so hard because I think there's a lot of controversy around all of the microtransactions being really egregious and like the payouts and reward system just not being very good, kind of forcing microtransactions, if you will. So I think this game kind of got review bombed. But I think they're trying to turn that ship around. But nonetheless, it is what it is. After that, Triangle Strategy for the Switch came out also March 4th. That is a Switch Metacritic score of 82 and a user score of 8.1. And that seems to be just a solid strategy RPG game. Again, I started the demo a little bit. I would love to spend some more time with this game when I find time. That seems to be the problem, man. So many games have come out. It's wild. Okay, let's see. Kokobo GP, which is, I believe that's a Switch exclusive, came out March 10th, has a Metacritic score of 64 and a user score of 2.0. I think this also had some sort of microtransaction or some sort of controversy where this game just got bombed on the user reviews. And then this little game called Tunic, which seems to be doing pretty well. It's also on Game Pass, so maybe try it out. Looks very Zelda-esque, very cute. Came out March 16th, has an Xbox user score, a Metacritic score of 86 and a user score of 7.9, so pretty good, I'd say. People seem to be enjoying that game. So it looks cool. Definitely check it out. If you're a Zelda fan, I definitely think you'll like that game, so check it out. It's on my backlog, albeit way in the backlog because there's other higher priority games I need to look into. And then we have Stranger of Paradise, Final Fantasy Origin, came out March 18th, has a PS5 Metacritic score of 72 and a user score of 6.0. And again, that game kind of just seems like middle of the pack, like meh type from what I'm seeing and hearing. Then we have Rune Factory 5, which is that RPG, the kind of the Harvest Moon / RPG style of game. Came out March 22nd for the Switch, has a Metacritic score of 70 and a user score of 6.8. So again, kind of in that middle ground. Ghostwire Tokyo, the PS5 exclusive from Tango Gameworks, came out March 25th, has a PS5 Metacritic score of 75 and a user score of 8.0. I was actually surprised by that because it's crazy because no one's really talking about this game. I've watched a little bit of gameplay, but no one's really talking about this game. And from what I've seen on howlongtobeat.com, it seems rather short for an open world game. Like, I think it was showing about 11 hours, which for me, I'm good with that. I'm good with shorter games because my time is very limited when it comes to video games. So I have no problem with that, but really interesting. It's kind of just came and gone. And it'll be interesting to see if this game goes on like super sale in the same way that Deathloop did. We have Kirby in the Forgotten Land, the highly anticipated Switch game, came out March 25th. Has a Metacritic score of 85 and a user score of 8.9. So that game seems to be doing pretty well too. Looks cool. I'd love to try it at some point later this year probably. And then we have Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, also March 25th. That was a very big day. Has a PS5 Metacritic score of 77 and a user score of 5.7. This game seems to be kind of mixed. It seems like it's more Borderlands, which is good or bad depending on your preference. But it also seems to have changed things up enough because of the story of the game, like kind of like D&D style for Tiny Tina. I don't know. It looks interesting. I wouldn't mind maybe trying it at some point because it does look interesting. And I like Borderlands. That's fun games. Albeit, Borderlands 3 was kind of so-so in my opinion. But I digress. After that, we have Moss Book 2, the PSVR game. Came out on March 31st, has a PS4 Metacritic score of 85 and a user score of 8.9. Now, I have the first Moss game for PSVR. I haven't played it yet, but I played the demo for Moss. That's how I learned about the game at the last time I went to PAX West in 2017. And it was awesome. It was really cool. And the devs were super, like the people there working were super cool about it. So it was awesome. It was fun. And I've heard nothing but great things about the first game. The sequel seems to be along the same. So awesome stuff there. And the last game is called Weird West. Also came out day one, Game Pass. Came out March 31st. Xbox Metacritic score of 81 and a user score of 7.5. That game looks really interesting. People seem to be enjoying it from what I can tell. So nonetheless, 26 games. There's more obviously that have been released, but those are kind of the big ones that I was able to extract and pull out. And quite the list here. And if we look at the ranking, if you go by the Metacritic score, Elden Ring is top. Then you have Horizon Forbidden West, Destiny Queen, The Witch Queen, Gran Turismo, Tunic up there, Moss is up there, Kirby and the Forgotten Lands up there, etc. And then if we sort by user score, Moss is up there at the top with Kirby, and then Pokemon is up there. So really interesting depending on which scores you're looking at. Now, which game do I think is Game of the Year thus far in 2022? And I feel like the answer is kind of obvious. It's Elden Ring. I don't think anyone can really argue that. Well, actually, I'm sure people can argue that, but I think Elden Ring is just kind of the obvious choice at this point. I think it's sold well. It's taken this world by storm, as we've talked about. It's gotten really great reviews, user scores. Like everyone seems to be loving this game, and it's doing very, very well. So I think that's the game to beat when you talk about Game of the Year. I really do. And with Breath of the Wild 2 kind of out of 2022, that leaves the door open for a couple other games. We'll get to that in a second. Now, some other games that I think will win awards of some sorts is Sifu. I can see Sifu winning some sort of award, whether it be like art direction or some sort of like uniqueness or some sort of out there kind of award. But I can see them walking away with an award. The other one is Horizon. I think Horizon will win like best art direction or something like that, or like best graphics. I mean, this game looks phenomenal on PS5, like just phenomenal. Like, so I could see this winning some sort of award. Like, it just makes sense. Or like voice actor. There's lots of voice actors in there. Maybe like a supporting voice actor or something like that could totally win that award. Another game I could see winning an award is Triangle Strategy. I could see this winning, or being like a nomination in like best RPG category or a tactics game category. I know there's several other RPGs that are going to be coming out this year, so I'm sure it'll have some contention in the category. But again, it solid critic scores, solid user scores. Seems like people enjoy this game. I can see it doing well, in come award time. And another game, just kind of jokingly, I can see win an award is Babylon's Fall for biggest flop. I mean, seriously, this game just seems like it is dead on arrival, and no one's talking about it. It's crazy. It's crazy to me. And we've talked about this a couple episodes ago about Square Enix's insistence on getting in the live service space. I don't understand it. I don't know why, because they do so much right. But yeah, Babylon's Fall. I think the biggest thing I don't want to see happen with Babylon's Fall is for it to like financially hurt Platinum Games to where they would be in serious jeopardy. We talked about their other game that they released, Sol Cresta. Again, no one's really talking about that game, but I think it looks really fun. I certainly want to try it out. But yeah, man, I don't know. I don't know what's going on over there in this space. So I kid and I say that in joking. But that leaves us with like, okay, so Elden Ring is Game of the Year so far. So what are some other big games coming out? Because Elden Ring is the game to beat. And there are a couple that come to mind that I can think of. The biggest that I can, well, second to biggest, or, one of the bigger ones, I guess is maybe a better way to put it, is Starfield, the Xbox exclusive. And, this has been a long coming game. There's definitely some hype around it. And for me, it's like, okay, is this game going to be another like Skyrim? To just have the resonance in just the earth-shattering status that Skyrim had when it launched in 2011? Or is it going to be another kind of mediocre release from Bethesda? I don't know the answer to that, and we're kind of all waiting and seeing, because, really, since Fallout 4, they've released games, but just not... They haven't been the same Bethesda that we've kind of know and love from like the Fallout 3 days or the Skyrim days, Oblivion days, etc. Like, it's just not on that same caliber. So we'll see what happens with Starfield. And Xbox certainly, I'm sure, had some influence in the latter parts of that development. But I'm sure if things go according to plan, I could see Starfield being in the conversation. If it's kind of on the Skyrim level that I think a lot of people are expecting it to be. Another game that I think will be in the conversation, assuming it releases this year, I'm pretty sure it's still slated for 2022. I haven't heard otherwise, is the Mario and Rabbids game. I think Star of Hope or something like that. Gosh, I can't remember what that game was called. Let me see here. Mario and Rabbids. Sparks of Hope. That's what it is. Sparks of Hope. I could see this game being in the conversation as well, because the first Mario and Rabbids game is phenomenal. Like, that game is so good. And I went in very skeptical of that game. I was like, this is a weird pairing of like two franchises. Ubisoft's making a Mario game, and it's like this tactics game. It just seemed so weird. But I gave it a go, and I still think to this day it is one of the best Switch games. It is fantastic. It's so good. Like, I'm not even I used to not be the biggest fan of like tactical games. And this one, to maybe the more hardcore tactical fans, is certainly not up to par. It's very, very watered down in a lot of ways. But it's just so good. It works. Like, the characters gel, the combat's fun, the gameplay's fun. It's fun to explore the world. It has a story that works. Like, I don't know, man. Mario Rabbids is just freaking awesome. I highly recommend the game. And like, you can get it for like $15 these days. Worth it. 100% it's worth it. So the sequel, I have high hopes for the sequel. And if it's everything we want and love of Mario and Rabbids plus some, then yeah, I think you got yourselves a good game that will be in the conversation. Another one, and this is the other one that was kind of obvious and up there at the Starfield tier level, is God of War Ragnarok. The sequel to God of War. I mean, God of War got perfect scores, Game of the Year, all around, like, just all the awards you could want. Like, it's just critically acclaimed, commercial success, all of the above, like everything you'd want. And so there's a lot of anticipation for God of War Ragnarok. Still supposedly coming out in 2022. We'll see. I'm pretty confident in that release date. I think we'll see it this fall. But I think that's the other one that's going to be kind of in the conversation. And we'll see. I mean, from what we've seen, which really isn't a ton, but we've seen some gameplay, or at least, clips of gameplay, and it's more of the same of God of War. So I think if it can maintain the kind of emotional storytelling it was and still have that fun combat, and the Valkyrie bosses in those games were just, those were some brutal bosses. And if they can add more of that type of stuff, I think, yeah, it's certainly gonna be in the conversation. I wouldn't expect anything less from the next God of War game. And I gotta be honest, like, it's not super high on like my most anticipated games list, if I'm being honest. And I think that's because, like, I know it's gonna be good, or I wouldn't expect it to not be good, if you kind of get what I'm saying. But I don't know. It's like, I think it's one of those games where, like, I know what I'm getting. Like, I'll play it, I'll support it. I'm excited to play it, but I'm not like, I must have this game. It's on my most anticipated list. Like, I'm dying to play this game. I'm not that level of hype. But nonetheless, the next God of War will probably be a game of the year. And the last one that I can kind of think of that could be a contender and in the conversation around game of the year as we end in 2022 is Hogwarts Legacy. We recently saw the state of play of Hogwarts Legacy. I meant to talk about it on the podcast. It just never got around to it, unfortunately. And the game looks awesome. I'm not even a big Harry Potter fan. Like, I've seen the movies and they're great. Like, my wife is more of a Harry Potter fan than I am. I've never read the books. It's just was never really my cup of tea growing up. But this looks great. The game looks awesome. And I feel like it's could be a great entry point for me into the franchise to maybe become a fan of like the Wizarding World, I guess is what it's called. But that game looks awesome. And if it delivers a good story and has, from what they've shown, all the fun gameplay mechanics executed pretty well, and it doesn't come out in kind of a very broken state, I could see that being in the conversation. I think you're going to see a lot of Harry Potter fans support it. I think it's going to be a fun RPG, and I think it could do well. Now, there is some controversy around the game, with J.K. Rowling and, some of the statements she says around, transgenders and feminism and stuff like that. But, you get the journalist activists that just is basically everyone in the gaming industry who's in kind of the legacy video game websites. You're going to get that, and it is what it is. But I think if you can separate the two and just look at the game for what it is and realize that there's actual people, developers, and a lot of people that have nothing to do with that like controversy, if you will, that it's okay to support it. But if you don't want to support it for whatever moralistic reason, then that's on you. That's totally okay. But I digress on that. I don't want to get into that stuff, but that will come up inevitably, and it'll be curious to see how many articles and websites we get on that stuff when the game finally drops. But nonetheless, I do think Hogwarts Legacy is going to be in the conversation, assuming it's not in a broken state and has a solid story. And so that's all I got today. That's Q1 2022 has been a monster period for video games. I mean, there's been so many games I can't even keep up. But there's been a lot of awesome stuff. Nothing short to play on. Like, there's so many games to play. So there's just, let me know what you've been playing. Out of this list, let me know what you think is the game of the year contender, and let me know what are these games you've been playing, what you think of them down in the comments below. Don't forget to leave a comment, drop a like, leave a rating on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. I'd certainly appreciate it. It really does help with the searching and the algorithms, all that stuff. And frankly, I need some ratings on the podcast. If I'm being honest, I need some ratings on the podcast. That would be super awesome if you could do that. And that's all I got for you guys. I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you stay safe out there. I hope you get lots of gaming time in. And if it's beautiful in your part of the world, I hope you get outside for some vitamin D. That is vitally important. And until next time, I'm Bonfire, and I will see you online.